Before they can do their jobs effectively, operators must be properly trained. Many plants have their own training departments to meet most of their training needs. Some of the training may take place in a classroom and be led by a training specialist. But training may also be conducted at the job site by experienced operators. This method of training is on-the-job training, or OJT. On-the-job training can be used for just about any job. However, for the purpose of this program, we'll focus on how it's used to train operators in a plant. We'll look at some general techniques and procedures you can use to be an effective OJT instructor. OJT is training that is conducted at the job site. It normally covers skills needed to do a job under the actual conditions encountered in that job. During OJT, a trainee accompanies an experienced operator on the job. Through observation and practice, the trainee acquires hands-on experience. He's able to learn the skills and procedures needed to perform the job. When you first think of on-the-job training, you may assume that the trainee is a new employee in a plant. However, this is not always the case. For example, OJT can be used for cross-training, that is, teaching an experienced worker a new job in the plant. OJT can also be used as a type of refresher course to improve worker skills and knowledge. It could work for tasks that are not routine, such as emergency actions. So, as you can see, on-the-job training can meet a variety of training needs. In many cases, OJT is used in conjunction with classroom training. The choice between training in a classroom or through OJT depends on a number of factors. Sometimes the choice is a simple matter of convenience, such as whether plant equipment or classroom space is available. The main factor is the subject matter. Some information is better taught in a classroom, while other information is better taught on the job. The subject matter for operator training can be divided into two broad categories: knowledge-based information and skills-based information. Knowledge-based information, which consists of the concepts, theory, and fundamentals of a job, can be more effectively taught in a classroom. But skills-based information, which usually requires hands-on experience and actually performing procedures, is typically better taught through OJT. Combining classroom training and OJT can be advantageous for a number of reasons. For example, the knowledge-based information learned in the classroom can be reinforced by OJT. Also, classroom training can help prepare the trainee for OJT. Specific examples of knowledge-based and skills-based information are explained in more detail in other parts of this program. An obvious advantage of OJT is that training occurs under the actual conditions in which the job is performed. Under the guidance of an OJT instructor, the trainee performs the tasks involved in the job the same way he would on his own. Trainees develop a feel for the plant and become accustomed to working in that environment. Another advantage of OJT is that it often enables operators who act as instructors to continue working on their jobs while they're conducting training. OJT is also beneficial since it's often conducted on a one-on-one basis. As a result, the trainee gets the maximum amount of time to practice the job tasks and has the instructor's full attention. The trainee can also ask questions without feeling intimidated by being in a group situation. And if the trainee starts to make a mistake, the OJT instructor is right there to correct him and explain what went wrong. In some cases, OJT may involve a trainee being assigned to more than one instructor during the course of the training. This can be beneficial in that the trainee may be exposed to different methods for doing the job. A lack of consistency among instructors may confuse the trainee, who may not know which instructor's methods are the best for the job. There are other potential drawbacks related to on-the-job training. For instance, although training under the actual conditions in the plant may in some ways be beneficial, normal plant noise may be distracting and make it difficult to hear. In addition, conducting OJT may hinder normal plant operations. OJT may interfere with other operators trying to do their jobs. Another potential disadvantage of OJT is that it may be limited by scheduling constraints and by the demands of the plant. For example, a trainee may have to learn how to shut down a process. Yet that process may not be scheduled for a shutdown for a long time. A number of problems may also occur if the OJT program is too informal or unstructured. If OJT is not formalized, it may be left up to the instructor to decide what is taught and when the training has been completed. The OJT instructor may also neglect to communicate all of the elements of the job, such as how to respond to potential problems and emergencies. With informal training, the trainee will see how to do the job, yet the method may include improper shortcuts and bad habits that the experienced operator has developed over time. Another potential weakness is that even though someone may be skilled and experienced as an operator, he may not necessarily be skilled as an instructor. So an operator who lacks good communication or teaching skills may not make a suitable instructor unless he himself is properly trained. Unstructured training can also cause problems when it's time to evaluate and document the training. An instructor may declare a trainee qualified once he performs a procedure. But if the trainee is just repeating what the trainer demonstrated earlier without fully understanding his actions, the trainee may not be able to perform the procedure on his own. Failing to keep proper records to document the progress of the trainee may also cause the plant problems. Auditors or accident investigators may one day check the abilities and training of the plant's operators. With a structured OJT program, records are kept to document that training was provided and to indicate the specific nature of the training. In general, most of the potential disadvantages of OJT can be avoided if a plant uses a formalized training program. It's true that there are advantages and disadvantages to OJT programs. However, most of the potential disadvantages can be avoided if a plant uses a formalized training program. What this program consists of will vary from plant to plant, but there are a few basic steps that, if followed, should eliminate most of the potential drawbacks. The first step, determining training needs, involves deciding whether or not training is needed, and then, if it is, what kind. The second step, developing training materials, involves determining the materials, tools, and personnel needed to teach the trainees, and making sure they're available when needed. The third step, implementing training, involves carrying out the training program as it was planned. And the fourth step, evaluation, involves determining whether the goals of the training program have been met. This includes evaluating the performances of both the trainee and the OJT program. With OJT and other types of training, terminology can vary from one plant to another, so you may hear different terms used to identify the same thing. You'll need to become familiar with your plant's terminology for two reasons: to understand the job better yourself and to be able to communicate the job better to your trainees. In this topic, we introduced on-the-job training. We compared OJT with classroom training. We discussed the pros and cons of OJT, and we looked at the main steps involved in a typical OJT program. At this point, review what you've learned by trying a few practice questions. Often, a training department is responsible for determining many of the plant's training needs. The OJT instructor may assist or help update the work of the training department. To determine training needs for a job, you need to analyze the job. You can obtain information from a number of sources. Perhaps the most obvious is your own experience. You can draw from what you know about the job. You can also get information from written procedures, from your training department, by direct observation of the job being performed, from workers who are performing the job, and from the unit supervisors or unit engineers. After the information's gathered, a job and task analysis is developed. A job and task analysis will usually identify and describe the knowledge and skills that a worker needs to do the job correctly. It may also include any prerequisites, any skills or knowledge the trainee needs to know before he starts his training. The depth and level of detail that you should go into when doing a job and task analysis depends on the job and the needs of the plant. The content of the job and task analysis may be determined by the performance standards the plant requires for the job. Plants may have different performance standards and different methods of testing and evaluating their trainees. For example, they may have their own operator certification or qualification standards, or there may be government requirements that have to be met. As an OJT instructor, it may or may not be your job to conduct formal testing and evaluation. But what you can do through effective OJT is prepare the trainees for this testing. You can make sure the skills identified on your job and task analysis are consistent with the plant's performance standards. Before training begins, the job and task analysis should be verified. It may be helpful to have more than one person check its content and confirm that all the training needs will be met. A unit supervisor, for example, may know of recent changes in equipment or procedures that should be accounted for. Have him note any tasks that are missing and any that should be removed. It's better to address any changes or discrepancies at this point rather than after OJT has been designed and implemented. After you've defined the training needs of the job, you should develop a profile of the trainee. Identify what skills and knowledge he already has. There is no need to teach him things he already knows. By comparing the job and task analysis with the trainee profile, you should be able to identify the items the trainee is not familiar with. These are the things you need to develop training for. If there is any question as to what the trainee knows or doesn't know, then schedule training. It's better to be overtrained than undertrained. Obviously, training is necessary whenever a worker is new on the job. Training may also be necessary for experienced workers if new equipment or new procedures are introduced. In some cases, formal training may not be necessary. It may be more efficient to simply supply the trainee with a job aid of some sort, such as a copy of the new procedures that must be followed. In any event, training efforts should be reserved for those who really need the training. One of the main benefits of OJT is that it can be tailored to meet the needs of the individual. For example, if a new employee has previous work experience, it would be inefficient to have him go through an entire training program on equipment and procedures he's already familiar with. To determine if training is necessary, ask the trainee to demonstrate his abilities by performing the tasks. His performance should be evaluated, and if he is able to perform the task correctly, then he tests out. He does not need training, and he can begin working on the job. On the other hand, if he does not perform certain tasks correctly, or if he is not aware of safety considerations, some form of training is needed. When you've compared a job and task analysis with a profile of the trainee, you need to identify the training needs that are to be met specifically through OJT. In other words, you have to determine the appropriate training methods. To do this, review the list of job and task items and decide which are suited for OJT and which are not. This involves reviewing the list and deciding which items are knowledge-based and which are skills-based. OJT lends itself to teaching through demonstration and practicing hands-on tasks, so it is best suited for teaching the skills-based elements of a job, such as operating equipment, doing preventive or minor maintenance, and taking samples. OJT is not best suited for the knowledge-based elements of a job, such as studying basic process theory, learning how to read P&IDs and flow diagrams, and learning company policies and guidelines. These knowledge-based elements are better taught in the classroom by an instructor, by watching a video presentation, through self-study, or by using a computer-based training program. Perhaps the ideal training approach is to have OJT reinforce the knowledge-based material covered in the classroom. For example, the instructor can introduce a process by discussing a flow diagram of it in the classroom. Then, after the trainee becomes familiar with the system, he can more easily identify the components when he actually sees the equipment during OJT. In this topic, we looked at the first main step in on-the-job training, determining training needs. Take some time now to answer a few practice questions on this material. Two of the most important training materials used in OJT programs are performance objectives and checklists. Basically, a performance objective briefly describes the outcome or intended result of the training, not the training procedure. It may describe the performance standards, time limits, or other conditions that a task must be completed under. A performance objective may also identify any equipment needed to perform a job. This one, for example, describes the intended outcome of a sampling procedure. Even if you don't develop performance objectives yourself, as an OJT instructor, you should understand what they entail so you know what the trainee needs to accomplish to successfully complete his training. While a performance objective describes an outcome or result, an OJT checklist identifies the specific steps or procedure that must be followed in order to accomplish the performance objective. During OJT, the instructor goes over each step on the checklist with the trainee. As the trainee accomplishes each item on the list, the instructor checks it off. When all of the items have been checked off, the trainee has met that performance objective. As an OJT instructor, you'll probably be using checklists during OJT. You may also need to help revise them if necessary. For example, when new equipment or procedures are introduced to your plant, you may discover that part of a checklist has become outdated. If this occurs, you should inform your supervisor that it must be revised. If you develop a checklist, don't include too many items. Having a cluttered checklist with too many items may needlessly complicate the training. If too many items are included on the checklist, minor tasks may appear to be as important as major tasks. Now, having too few items on a checklist is also a problem. Important steps may be omitted. By looking at a checklist, a trainee should be able to understand how a job is completed step by step. The complexity of the job typically determines how many items are on the checklist. During on-the-job training, the instructor should be sure to supply the trainee with appropriate training aids to assist him. For example, the trainee should have a copy of the plant's operating procedures, as well as any written safety documents for the job. System prints or flow diagrams are other good training aids. They help the trainee become familiar with the components and operation of the system. It's also helpful for a trainee to see a copy of the performance objectives or evaluation standards so he knows in advance what he is to be evaluated on. In addition, by seeing the checklist, the trainee can keep track of his progress and know what he still needs to accomplish in order to complete his training. During OJT, the trainee should also be supplied with tools and equipment that he may need to help him perform the job. Finally, in addition to the objectives and checklists, you may need other types of records or documents to track the trainee's progress. This may be in the form of a progression chart, which tracks the trainee's progress in graphic form, or a training schedule. Charts and schedules may include information such as the tasks the trainee will learn, target dates, and completion dates. This information can help the instructor determine whether the trainee is ahead of, on, or behind schedule. In this topic, we looked at some features of a typical tank truck, and we saw some basic procedures for loading and unloading a tank truck. Now try some practice questions related to this material. In this topic, we looked at some of the important training materials related to OJT. We covered performance objectives, checklists, and assorted other training aids. Now's a good time to answer a couple of practice questions on this material.